Before we talk about how you're going to fix it, let's talk about the problem so that people understand exactly what the problem is. And I must say, Connecticut's not alone in this. There are other states in even worse shape. But you've got a lot of unfunded pension plan problems. Is that the biggest problem you face?
It's a big problem. We haven't dealt with it for over a generation now. It represents close to 30% of our budget when you take the fixed debt, the pension, and the health care costs. This is money that's going to pay for past due bills as opposed to investing in our future. So the first thing I've got to do is get that rising fixed costs under control, flatten that out so as we grow revenues in the state, that fixed cost becomes a smaller and smaller piece of our budget, and we're investing more of our budget into our future.
Well, exactly. Investing in your future. We'll put up a little bar chart here that sort of shows the growth or shrinking of GDP for Connecticut, which had been doing quite well, and now it's sort of up and down, almost from year to year. How much of that is because you are having to service all of this debt, which is not going for productive purposes?
Well, we've not created many jobs over the last generation or so. We've been a laggard. A lot of our industry is a little bit older. We haven't invested in transportation and our infrastructure, and we do have the pension overhang. But there's a lot of really good news going on, too. You know, advanced manufacturing is really growing. Sikorsky, an electric boat. We have tens of thousands of jobs we're having a hard time filling. So my job is to train people and make sure these are Connecticut jobs and these companies stay, grow, and prosper here. So
let's talk about your plan. I mean, there are a lot of elements to it, I must say. A lot of it. But what are the principal things that you're proposing that you think will dig Connecticut out of this little hole they found themselves in?
Well, one thing, I'm making a big emphasis upon fixing our transportation system. If I can get from Stamford to New York in 30 minutes as opposed to 50 minutes, that opens up a whole segment of the state. If I can get New Haven and Hartford, Bridgeport, New Haven better connected, even though we don't have any big cities, we'll have 4 smaller cities, all of which have their own identity and easy to get around. Look, our strategic location should be an advantage, not a disadvantage. Right now, with gridlock, it's a bit of a disadvantage.
So talking about transportation, one of the things you propose is some tolls on some roads. First of all, I'm curious, which roads would it be? And if I drive the Merritt Parkway, for example, would I pay a toll for that?
If you're on the Merritt, David, I think we'd probably put a toll there. We'd probably put it on 91 and 95, just the 3 or 4 major arteries.
And that would be
out-of-staters would pay, like you, 35, 40% of the bill. We're paying for all the neighboring states, and we've got to have a new source of revenue to fix our roads and bridges.
And there was a little bit of back and forth over whether it's just trucks or trucks and all vehicles. Is it now all vehicles you're proposing?
Well, what Gina's done up in Rhode Island, Gina Raimondo, is told just trucks. And we thought we'd have some resolution in terms of the lawsuit up there, whether that works or not. I don't think we're going to have resolution. I'm not sure it's going to raise enough revenue to fix the roads and bridges and accelerate our rail service. So we've got both bills in front of the legislature right now.
In addition to that, you're talking about sharing, having local government share in the pension burden to some extent. Not all of it by any means, but for some of it. What's the reaction from the local governments to that?
Oh, our local governments have feisty independence. There's 169 towns. But look, I've said during the campaign we cannot afford to subsidize inefficiency any longer. And we have, well over 150 superintendents and deputy superintendents. We spend more money outside of the classroom than we do inside of the classroom. So I'm not going to take away anybody's local control of their schools, but I'm going to give everybody incentives to share those back office costs, which are really draining our treasury.
Can you really address the pension issue without, in some way, modifying the benefits being paid?
I'm not sure. What I've got to do up front is we're going to bring down the health care costs. I think you're going to see real transitions on that. We're going to flatten out the liabilities over a period of time, so we're not putting a higher and higher proportion of our budget into that. And over time, I've got to look at COLA and ways we can reduce the high costs going forward. What people don't understand is young employees have given up an awful lot. And that's not where the problem is. Our problem is we didn't set aside a dime for the retirees. Now they're retiring, and all that liability's on our plate.
As you say, Governor, that's not the only state that has that problem. It's shared by some other states around the country. You talked about some of the thriving companies that you want to hold up as really opportunities in the state of Connecticut. What would be the effect, if any, of your plan on companies either deciding to move to Connecticut or move away from Connecticut?
we have strong business support behind what we're trying to do, not just on the fixed cost side, but also in terms of transportation and workforce development. I think the business community, and we're in collaboration, we're partners on this, know how important it is we get the state moving again on rail as well as highway and start training people going forward. And we have a new collaboration with our business community. I've got to make sure they know they have a friend in the governor's office.
Some of the people who work for some of the big companies, we hear a lot about hedge funds, for example, in Greenwich, that you know a fair amount about, are saying they're not at all happy because they can't take those state and local tax deductions. We'll put up a slide here that shows Connecticut isn't at the very top, but a fair number of people do take those SALT deductions. How is that having an effect on people leaving the state that you've detected?
It's certainly got everybody's attention, I can tell you that. I know that income tax revenues in New York are down. People think the SALT deductions may be one of the reasons that's going on. That's one of the reasons I've said, look, I can't eliminate the income tax, but I am flattening it out. We're not going to have any increase in the income tax this year. Give people some sense of certainty that this is what our budget's going to look like, and make sure people know how conscious we are that taxes are one of the reasons they move sometimes.
Well, it's interesting, Governor, because as I understand your plan, correct me if I'm wrong, you'd be increasing some sales taxes, but not making more graduated your income tax, and not increasing your income tax, which is relatively low, maybe a little higher than Massachusetts, but relatively low. Do you get criticism from your own party, the Democrats, that that is regressive?
We've increased our income tax, 4 or 5 times over the last 12 years, and it's a law of diminishing returns. And I'll tell you, David, I mean, the sales tax used to be the revenue workhorse of our state back when the sales tax was applied to, say, 75, 85% of our economy. Today, our sales tax is applied to much less than half of the economy. It's the Sears Roebuck economy, the over-the-counter economy. But the digital and service economy are tax exempt. So we have tried to say we're going to hold the line on the sales tax, not raise the rate, but expand the base a little bit. You know, why is it that a Main Street merchant has to collect sales tax on selling a lawnmower, and while the service economy, the internet retailers haven't had to collect sales tax until very recently? That's going to change.
On the subject of the SALT deduction, so-called SALT deductions, state and local taxes, there have been efforts by Connecticut and New York and others to try to ameliorate the problem for individual taxpayers on it. The IRS seems to be pushing back pretty hard. Are you having conversations with the federal government about whether there is some way to ameliorate the effects?
I can tell you that we're going to have probably 20,000 state employees retiring over the next 3, 4, 5 years. And I'm going to think about how do we replace them with other state employees? Do we work more collaboratively with the not-for-profits? Do we have a charitable deduction? Maybe there's some ways that not-for-profits could take more of a lead role going forward. That'd be one way to address the SALT deduction issue.
Interesting. And let's talk about the interest payments that you have to pay. We can put up a chart here that actually shows the yield curve for the Connecticut bonds, and it's been going up pretty steadily. You have a problem not just of paying the bills, but also paying more and more of your biennial budget in interest. At what point does that really start to choke off what you're trying to accomplish?
It's getting more expensive, and it creates a certain uncertainty about our future. So that's why we've held the line on taxes. We balanced the budget without raising rates. We are looking for a new source of revenues to do our transportation. We're not going to just borrow. What we are going to do is have a new source of revenues that allows us to speed up our transportation system. I think the rating agencies are going to be very pleased with the direction we've taken on this budget.
A lot of what we've talked about, Governor, so far is really a revenue enhancement, raising revenue from various sources. Are there places where you could cut costs that would not substantially hurt the citizens of Connecticut?
Well, we're all going to have to cut a little bit here. I mean, I have said we've been on a bond binge for the last 7 or 8 years, and we're going to have to go on a dead diet. So I'm going to cut probably $500–600 million a year out of our bonding authority, so we can start to bring down those fixed costs and get our budget back stabilized. I'm going hard at our employee health care costs, finding a way without disadvantaging anybody, we can bring down those costs by fixing the amount that we pay to each of the hospitals. So I think I'm convincing people that over time we are bringing those costs under control. I was just at an opening where we're repairing one of our 90-year-old bridges, and we're repairing that bridge at half the price of what it would have been a generation ago by assembling it off-site and then putting it in place. And that bridge will be replaced with just 2 weekends out of service. So we're being able to show the taxpayers we're making some real efficiencies in terms of how we do business.
Governor, you mentioned healthcare costs. That's a problem for the entire country as we see the percentage of GDP approaching 18% now for the country. And there's this grand quest for bending the cost curves. Do you have any ideas up in Connecticut that maybe we could apply some other places as well that could bend the cost curve on healthcare?
Yeah, right now our state employees can go to any hospital they want to, and we'll pay whatever the hospital charges us. Maybe we come up with a methodology where we'll pay up to a certain amount. That gets you into, the vast majority of our hospitals, but we don't pay whatever they charge. Gives us a little bit of leverage going forward. Maybe we'll pay you $3,000 as a state employee if you go get your hip replaced at a place where it does it for $20,000 less. So we're going to make some real reforms that bring down healthcare costs because they are going up so much faster than our revenues.
And finally, Governor, you talked about the business community really being behind this plan of yours. What about your legislature? Because you're going to need legislative support, and these sorts of things can be very divisive.
It's tough. It's not an easy vote. I'm asking people to, suck it up, come to the table. If you have a better idea, tell me what that better idea is. But I've got a way to pay for our long-term investments that we've got to do. All of our neighbors are doing this along the Atlantic seaboard. Out-of-staters would pay 40% of the tolling going forward. It's going to be a tough vote for the legislature, but I need them to step up to the table. It'll be a courageous vote, and we're going to get it done.